video. I am Sean, and we are live once again here on YouTube. We are going to address one of the most asked questions that we get, mainly, how do you make puppet patterns? And the way we're going to show you how we make puppet patterns is by making some simple hair patterns for the puppets that we are creating for our new Avenue Q rental puppets. As you can see, this will be the Nicky rental puppet. His hair has already been made and patterned. So this just sort of gives you an example of what we're going to be making. Now, this hair is not sewn in place yet. Eventually, it will all be hand sewn in place. But since we're making a lot of puppets, what we're trying to do is achieve each step with each puppet, and then we can sew all of them in place. All right? So what are you going to need to make puppet hair? I mean, obviously, it's helpful if you have a puppet that you want to make hair for. So we're going to be making hair for this Princeton puppet. So you need the form that you want to make hair for, or essentially the form you want to pattern, because these techniques are the very same techniques that you can use to drape a foam puppet head and make a fleece or fur pattern, and then eventually a covering for your puppet. So what do you need to get started? I already said you need something to pattern. For you, it could be a simple foam shape. In my case, it's a nearly complete puppet head. It doesn't have the brain inside yet, but you can see this is our pattern. We have the eyes and nose and ears just mocked in for now. We'll do some other videos showing you how we're going to make these noses and these eyes, which we're pretty excited about. What else do you need? You need some patterning material. And this is true no matter what kind of pattern you're making. You need just like a dummy material that you have a lot of. When Joann's was going out of business, we stocked up on polar fleece. And we grabbed some drab neutral colors because this makes great patterning material. So we have some extra fleece that we're going to use. This is just a lightweight polar fleece. It has some stretch to it, and that's something to keep in mind. The fur that we're using will pretty much have no stretch. So as you're patterning it, you don't want to be stretching too far around because the fur just won't be able to do that. So keep the final material that you're going to use in mind. Now, I could use a muslin, for example, but that really has no stretch. However, I just find that using the polar fleece is a little nicer to work with. It kind of holds in place on the puppet fleece and all that. So that's why I'm in favor of using polar fleece for this. Okay, so you have your fleece that you're going to pattern with. What else do you need? You're going to need some tracing paper. So I got nice big sheet of tracing paper. It's 19 by 24 inches. We have these in stock all the time. We're always buying these. We're always running out and we're always buying these. This is great for pattern making. First of all, it's large, and you'll see how we use tracing paper to make your pattern symmetrical, because that's very important, unless your character is asymmetrical. What else do we need? Once your pattern is created, you'll want to transfer it to another material that is a little sturdier. So we have tag board. Tag board, you can use this, you can use sturdy paper, you can even use manila envelopes. Depending upon the size of the patterns, I may be taping a few sheets together. So we also have some tape, just in case we need it. Then you'll need a pen or pencil, a Sharpie, some straight pins, and a silver pencil. Now I'm using a silver pencil, color pencil in particular, because the fabric that I'm going to be using, the fur, the faux fur, is black. So I want to make sure that it shows up with this. Scissors. I have two different kinds of scissors here. I will need some Persona blades, which I think I have some. Yep. These are sharp, so be careful. Persona blade to cut out the fur. And then for sewing, I have thread that will match, plus a needle, so black thread for black hair, and I also use a thimble. Okay, So those are all of the things that I'm going to be using today to make the pattern. Now, I will say there are going to be opportunities for everyone out there to ask questions, especially when I start the hand sewing piece of it. So if you have a question, just go ahead and keep that in mind until we get to the hand sewing, and then I will ask if anyone has questions, and then that will be a great time for you to ask the questions that you have. But let's get started. Now, the first thing you have to know when you're making hair for a puppet is, who is this puppet? What is the puppet's character? So, for example, when we did the Nicky, you know, we knew that Nicky he's kind of disheveled. He's like that, you know, roommate that won't go away type, you know, not the most organized. And so we purposely chose this fur that has this kind of frazzly, kinky appearance, and that kind of dictates his character. Now, we know Princeton is a little more pulled together. He's a recent college graduate. So we're going to do like an executive cut, okay? So what that means is I'm going to find a place to part. Now, I could part down the middle, but I think it'd be more fun to part off to the side. And the reason why I say it's important to know where the part is you want to think about fur direction. So if I'm going to use this as my part, then I want the hair going this way, right? The fur will lay this way on this side of the part and lay this way on that side of the part. Additionally, for the back, we want it to come straight down. And also, I think it'd be good for him to have little sideburns that will also be coming down as well. So this hairpiece will be multiple pieces of fur stitched together. So it'll probably be 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5. So as many as 5 individual pieces hand stitched together to create this one puppet wig, this handmade puppet wig. All right, so let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my patterning material, which is this polar fleece, and I do want to pay attention to stretch. Even though I'm not using the stretch, all of these materials do have a grain. Now, with fur, what's more important is the direction. With fleece, what's really important is the stretch. So usually if I'm using something that's going to be stretchy, I'll want the stretch to go this way, not forward and back. You want it to go like that, all right, across the horizon. So I'm still going to do that anyway, even though I'm not that concerned about the stretch. So the first thing I do is I just take a piece of fabric that I know is larger than I need it to be. I identify which direction is the stretch. Now remember, I'm not going to stretch it very much because the final material will not be very stretchy. And I'm going to figure out where I want my hairline to go. What's the lowest point I want my hairline to go? And I'm actually purposely going to go a little further than I know I need to, because I can always trim this shorter. So I'm going to try and drive all the seams to where a hairline would naturally have a seam. So obviously I want that part to be a seam, and where we kind of change directions from the front to the back, I want that to be a seam. And then furthermore, where the sideburns are, that could be a seam as well. All right, so all I do is I just start pinning my fabric in place. I'm not being too careful about it. I'm just sort of pinning it in place. And the first thing I'm going to do is actually I'm going to create a symmetrical hair pattern so that I know the ear cutout is symmetrical, the back of the hair is symmetrical, and the sideburns are symmetrical. And I'm not going to worry about the front seam yet. That's something that we'll do later on, all right? So the first things first, let's get a symmetrical pattern. And this will be super useful if it just so happens the pattern that you are creating in fleece or fur or whatever you happen to be making is symmetrical. This will be very useful to you. So I'm just pinning it in place. Now, I already sort of know where I want to drive those seams. I also know this guy has ears. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut out where the ears go. because there's no point in grouping the fabric or whatever. I know I'm going to work around the ears anyway. So where the ears are at the base, they're about here, and they go to about here. I'm just going to go ahead and mark that line. And then I'm just going to cut to the line using my smaller pair of scissors. And this is all extra for now. You want to work with more material than you need. Okay. All right, so now the ear can pop through. And honestly, for this, if we're having thicker ears, let's say it had like horns or something like that, then I would want to perhaps leave more space, but just a slice in the fleece will be enough to do the job. Okay, so that's one. And then I'm going to mark the ears on the other side. So let's see where we are. All right, first I'm going to mark it with a pen. As you can see right now, this is very non-symmetrical, but we're going to true this pattern up once we've kind of done some markings on this. Okay. And then once we have a symmetrical piece, we can put in our hairstyle. And if you happen to be making a symmetrical piece, then you don't have to worry about the step following that. All right, so pretty simple. As you can see, I just sort of am making him like a head covering, okay? Now the next thing I know is there's probably gonna be a seam in the back because of the way this fabric tends to gather. So I'm just gonna follow the natural flow of the material, and since that fur is going that direction, ultimately, and it's in the back, plus it's fur, you'll never see it. I mean, I could machine stitch it and you still wouldn't see it. So I'm gonna follow my natural seam line to the center of the head. I'm just gonna trace it until I get to the back of the head. And I'm gonna just gather the material. And I'm looking in the back to make sure that I'm still following the center line. One of the things we did with these Avenue Q puppets is we actually machine stitched the fleece. We don't normally do that. Normally when we do fleece for a puppet, we hand sew them. But these we machine stitched for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of his head is covered up with hair, and a lot of his face is covered up with face, eyes and noses and all that, especially when it comes to Nikki, and he's got the 5 o'clock shadow and everything. So these seams are going to be pretty invisible. And also, these puppets are not made for television. They're made for a theater production. So, you know, even past 2 rows, or if even, those seams are going to be completely invisible. They're going to disappear. We also used polar fleece for these instead of hand-dyed fleece. And the reason is, a lot of times these puppets are being rented out to independent theater companies or even high schools. And so we wanted something that was the most durable possible. Now it's true, puppet fleeces are rather durable, but the fact that they're hand-dyed can make them less durable. You know, if one gets left out in the light, or who knows, there's lots of things that can happen. Grubby fingers, you name it. We have seen it. So just for all of those reasons, we opted for the polar fleece. So some folks have asked, that's the reason why. So I'm going to put a seam down the center. Again, this is for my symmetrical pattern. Now, as you see, I already have a lot of extra fleece here. Now, no matter what shape you're patterning, the technique is the same. And I'm hoping that by showing you a real simple kind of a draping technique, you'll sort of be able to generalize for your own puppet. But now that I know I have this excess that I don't need, I can just take my pen and I'm going to mark, you know, pretty close to the pen line that this is going away. This is going away. And for now, I'm going to take my bigger scissors. I'm just going to cut off this excess. Just get it out of my way. I'm not too concerned with how uniform I'm cutting it. I'm not concerned with the symmetry yet. I'm not concerned at all. All I'm really concerned about is trying to get an accurate shape. Okay, so now I notice that, now also you want to try to work as few seams in as possible. Now this is already going to have extra seams because of fur direction. But if I wasn't concerned about that, then I could pretty much make a hair covering with just one seam down the back. That's pretty cool. So you want to try to find the natural folds in the fabric and gather and pin up towards those areas, because if you do that, you're working with the fabric to get as few seams as possible, and it can take some of these unusual shapes that your puppet might have. All right. So now I noticed that there wants to be a seam here. I just noticed the fabric is gathering. I don't want there to be a seam there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of work this little, where the fleece is gathering towards the ear, and just see if I can resolve it and instead take a little off of the ear. So if I kind of open up that ear and move it this way a little bit, there. I've just removed that little fold. And now what I can do is just trace up a new line. And now this will be my cutout for the ear, and I've just minimized the need for a whole different seam, okay? And as you see, since it's symmetrical, it's happening on this side too, where the fabric is saying there should be a seam here. And certainly I could put a seam here. I could put a seam here and here and here and here and here. I could drive myself crazy. But I want to try and simplify in this step. So I'm going to take out this, and I'm just going to work that crease, that excess fabric, right to the ear. I'm going to go ahead and just pin it in place. And I'll take my pen and trace. That's where I'm cutting to remove that excess material. All right. Okay. So we're getting closer. Now what I can do is I'm actually going to pull this just a little tighter, not too tight. I don't want to trick myself and think that I have a lot more stretch than I do. If I knew my final material was going to be a polar fleece or a Nyla fleece, not necessarily F3, but a more traditional puppet fleece or a Nyla fleece, then I would be pulling this quite a bit tighter, because those materials do indeed have more of a stretch. So now I got this excess here. Looks like a little thin. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. And I'm not worrying about cutting right to the pen line, because those pen lines, which I can now update, right here, just right along the fold. Okay. So then I need to choose where the back of the hair is, and what the shape of the back of the hair is. So maybe it's maybe I'll make it a little around from the ear. So instead of going like down and across, maybe I'll just take it from here and just kind of make it a round shape, like so. Okay. So I'm just going to start from the ear, and I'm just going to go around like that. And on the other side, I'm not going to stress about it, but I will try to make it match. But really, I can already tell it's not symmetrical, but really we're going to be truing this up using the tracing paper, and you'll see how that technique happens. So now I have that. Now I know I want to get some sideburns on him, so I don't want him to be like Elvis Presley in the 70s. I want them to be a little conservative, so maybe coming up the ear, maybe 3/4 down the ear, and do the same on the other side. Okay. So now I want to think about what's the lowest point that his hair might come down in a sweep. So I want it to be above the eyebrow, because I do want those eyebrows to peek through. But if it covers a little bit with the little fibers, that's fine. So let's just say that for now, I'm going to make this the point. And again, this is just going to give us a symmetrical hair covering. This is not going to give us the final pattern. Okay, so now I can cut off some of this excess material. So okay, that's always useful. I mean, I pretty much know what I'm making, but even I am surprised that when I take something and lay it flat, I'm like, what did I just make? So while it's in this form, best to do a few markings. So I might want to mark that this is the center front, right? I'm kind of going overboard, but I might say this is an ear. Okay? I might give myself registration marks back here. I might say this is the center back. Okay, all of that. For more complex patterns, you'll find yourself making a lot of markings, and even still, you're like, what? What am I making? What is this supposed to be? We won't have that problem today. Okay. So now, to get my symmetrical pattern, all I'm going to do, first of all, that's a fun character. Looks like a little elf. All right. So I'm going to take the pattern off. I'm removing the pins and putting them. By the way, these magnetic pin holders are really great. Highly recommend them. Especially if you drop a bunch of pins, you can just wave them around and pick them up. In fact, the first time I built puppets a million years ago at Jim Henson's Creature Shop, one of the first things I did was I went ahead and opened up a bunch of pins, the box of pins, and the whole pin box flew everywhere. And that was super embarrassing. Luckily, they had a magnetic pin thing, and I could just pick them all up. I felt like a real rookie that day. So the part for this will be marking later. The parts and all how we break up the hair pattern will be marked later. Right now, we're just going into a symmetrical hair piece for everyone wondering. Like, I thought he was going to have a part. I thought it was going to be an executive cut. So now I have this pattern. This is a very common looking puppet pattern. Once you start building more and more puppets, you will automatically know that when you see a shape like this, that's going to be round. Obviously, because I marked it as ear, I know that these don't get stitched together, but in fact, they stay open, and here's the front of the line. Eventually, we're going to have another seam come through here and a seam come through here. But let's get our symmetrical pattern first. And the way we do that is we grab some tracing paper, and you can use a pen or pencil. I'm going to pen out, so I'll just use this. Pattern weights, I didn't mention at the top, but if you've seen any of our videos before, pattern weights are super useful. All they are little fabric bean bags, basically, and they can hold down your pattern. That way you're not rushing around the workshop looking for something heavy enough to hold the pattern in place. And then I'm just going to trace the pattern as it is. I'm not concerned with the symmetry yet. Just tracing it as it is. Now, I know we have that ear cut out. It's a little more because that ear cutout is also serving as a helping to take out a little excess fabric in the back. Okay. Put these lines there. Honestly, it's such a small shape I probably won't use them, but for best practices, why not mark them? All right, so now I've got my pattern traced on tracing paper. If I were to just make this, it would be as uneven as this, and that's not what we want to do. We want to make this even. So what I can do is, I'm just going to darken up some of these lines that are rather faint, because the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the median point between all these lines. And the way I do that is I'm going to fold down the center. So that's why I line this front line up with this grid on our work surface. And there's like a central line. I'm going to fold it on that central line. And now you'll see just how uneven the pattern is. You can see that. You can see that there's two lines here. So in reality, our center, our symmetrical line is in between these two lines. It's in between these two lines. It's in between these two lines. So all I do is grab a pen. You can use a different color. You can use pencil. I'm just going to use the same pen. And I'm going to trace, and I'm going to draw in between these lines. This is going to be my new line. So that makes it a little shorter on one side, a little longer on the other, and ultimately makes it even. And the same here, I'm going to draw in between those two lines. I'll do the same here, drawing in between. And looks like it wants to be here. and a little sideburn, and then we're coming down to the front. Okay. So now what I do, I can mark these too. I would mark these in between where they are, in between. So then I can take my scissors, cut them out. And this pattern making process can be used for fleece head covering, anything. The thing with puppet patterns is you have to make them. You have to start with something to make them. So for this, we're starting with that fleece. I'm going to get this even pattern, and then after I get the even one, I'm going to add a little character and make sure that we're getting the hairstyle just the way we want it, right? Let's see, it's a little tricky, let's say like that. Okay, so now I have my even pattern. So it started like this, okay? And this line we totally ignore because this is now our new pattern. So now what I want to do is I want to figure out all the character pieces of this little hair piece. So the next thing I'm going to do is get a drink of water. Don't wait to hydrate. Got another piece of fleece here. Again, super cheap junk fleece. We got it. Joann's, when they were going out of business, we stocked up. Hopefully some of you did the same. Great opportunity to stock up on puppet building supplies. Although it's a shame to have them gone. You just had to make the most out of it, I guess. Lemons from lemonade. Or lemonade from lemons, you might even say. All right. So now I'm using my pattern weights. I'm taking this pattern, and I'm just going to trace it using the marker. This is not my final material, but if I was making something out of fleece and this was my final material, then first of all, I probably wouldn't be using a black marker on this light material, but it still gives you an idea. Okay, I can mark these registration marks. Again, they're not really essential, but let's just do it anyway for best practices. Okay. Now, if I was knowing this is going to be a pattern for fleece, then I would want to do like this, and that's showing that the stretch is going that way, okay? But ultimately, this is going to be a fur pattern. So now I cut out my symmetrical pattern. Put the excess aside, which I'll definitely use for something else. Some people, when they ask about what a puppet costs, they have a sort of an idea in their mind of what puppets cost because, you know, puppets look rather simple. But I think when you really start to boil down all of the actual work, labor, and knowledge that goes into puppet building, that may help give people a better understanding of what a puppet might actually cost. Because right now, all of this time I'm spending is just for one element, and that's the hair. And ultimately, a puppet is going to be made up of hundreds of different elements. You know, hair is just one piece of it. Okay, so here's my symmetrical pattern. So I go back to my puppet head, and if this was my final piece, I would just put it on, pin it on, stitch it, blah, 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 and be done. But I'm using the ears as my guide post. Got the sideburns here. I'm going to pull those in a little bit. Pin those in place. Pin this sideburn in place. And then this is a little longer. And I see how I can actually edit this pattern a little bit just so the hair doesn't come down so low. For some reason it's coming down a little lower on this side. I may have pinned it a little lower. And also, it's possible this puppet isn't 100% symmetrical. And then I want to bring our pattern around the back. So maybe before I pin that in place, I'll do the back. So There's my registration points. Another registration mark here. That. Now I can see this is kind of coming to a strange point, which I don't like, which is fine. I can just edit the pattern. All I'm going to do is cut it across and give us more of a straight cut across. Okay. Also, I'm noticing that this ear can be positioned a little further forward. Yeah, to make it more symmetrical. All right, so then this sideburn gets put in place here. Okay. So he has a little tip on the point of his head right now. Not too concerned about that. Let's see, actually it's still, okay, so the ears were not quite symmetrical, which is fine. So I'm going to just take the ears off for now, and instead I'm going to move the hair, and then what we can do is eventually we'll just position the ears based on where the hair goes. So the whole thing needs to slide this way a little bit. So that's fine. This is a good time to do that. You want to get all your figuring out now when it's just in this mode. So now I've got this lined up. I have this other stitch line here, which I can kind of use as a general marker. Try to look at those little visual markers. Let's see, so here. Okay, this should be more symmetrical. And yeah. You can also use a tape measure. These fabric tape measures are great, and you can find like a point on the puppet and say, okay, from lip to hair, okay, this is 1.25 inches approximately. And you go here to here, and you say, oh, it's almost 1.75 inches. So the operation needs to slide this way a little bit. And you keep doing that until you dial it in, because you'll just slide a little bit one way, and then it'll go the other way. Now, this really matters when you're finally stitching in place. So now we're coming at 1.5 inches here and 1.5 inches here. So those are the little adjustments you can make. I know that this is his hairline. That just makes way for the ear. Great. All right, so Duke. I'll end up making an adjustment to that, I already know. All right, now let's pull our center line on the back. Okay, I'm just matching up those registration lines. One thing I noticed too is, oh, you know, the hair is too far forward, because I think we established that it'd be a little above the, that's why it's so far down in the back. I just need to rock the whole thing forward to make sure it's right above the eyebrow. Okay, so let's get our position in. There we are. Okay, that will change things. This is the art, not science portion of your puppet building experience. Okay, just above the eyebrow. And we're going to end up cutting some of this away to give him that hairstyle. Okay. Now, it should be coming, yep, now it's coming right at the neckline. All those little things that you need to keep track of. Make sure your puppet is coming along the way you want it to be coming along. Okay, there's a little bit of pucker in this pattern. Not too concerned about it, especially since the final material is going to be fur, and it already has some body and a heft to it, and that will not show. So that's not concerning to me. Okay, so then his ears will go here, like so. And you kind of get an idea of this is what the puppet is looking like. Okay? So now we need to make our actual hair pattern. So I'm just pinning a few of these things in place. And I'm going to head and put a few pins and mark up where I want this to be. Okay, so now I need to pick where his part is going to be. So it looks like the part should be on this side. And probably maybe just about kind of like near his eyebrow, like so. So I'm just going to draw a line for that part. That's our part. Now, all the hair on this side of the part is going to come this way. So I'm going to make an arrow indicating that hair goes that way. And as it turns out, that happens to work perfectly for our sideburn. Okay. And then all the hair on this side of the part is going to go this way. So that means there's going to be a stitch with hair going two opposite directions. So I have this seam back here, and I'm going to try and not make too many things converge. Like, for example, I don't want to bring this over that little seam and then have to stitch a little tiny. So I'm just going to use artistic license, and I'm just going to bring it to that seam. And then I'm going to bring it all the way like that. Now this side I want to make a little smaller, but this back side is going to be the same, so it's going to come all the way like this. But I want to make this a little smaller, so, and I'm also going to make a little bit of a curve. So I'm going to actually bring this in a little, like so, and this like that. All right. So for starters, let me go ahead and cut that section out so we have our uneven part. So we know this is one shape we're removing. Okay. And now I'm going to put some pins here, because I also know that this is now going to be a cut. Okay. And also, I'm going to cut along here as well. So, I'm going to put some pins on either side of that. And then I'll cut it, and we'll trace it up. I'll show you what that looks like. On either side. Now, just to try to avert confusion, I might do something like this. Like I'll put a line here and this. Okay, these two go together. Maybe I'll put two lines right there, so I know those two go together. Then I might put a line here, and maybe 1, 2, 3, right? I might again say center back here, center back, right? I want to make sure this fur is going down and down in the back. Then I might say something like, this is A, goes to A. This is B, goes to B, and then this is C, and goes to C. All right? Looks a little like a mess right now, but once I transfer this to my tracing paper and eventually to tag board, we can clean all of this up. So, let's take all these pins. I'll actually make my cuts. So I'm going to cut here. Okay, cut here. Okay, here's my first piece. Keep these other ones in place so we don't lose our place. Once you get too many pattern pieces, it's pretty easy to get confused. So, I got my first pattern piece. I'm going to grab a piece of tracing paper. Now, we're not going to do the symmetrical trick because now we're not going for something to be symmetrical. So all I need to do is put the tracing paper down, put on some pattern weights, and I'm going to just trace it up. You can use a pencil or a pen. I just happen to have a pen handy, so I'm using a pen. And put the 2 dashes here. Remember, this is going to be A. There's 2 dashes here. This is going to be B, and directions this way. There, and I've just sort of roughed it in. So now what I can do is transfer it to my tag board. This is more like since we're making a lot of these, it just makes it easier to keep everything straight. All right. So I'll cut this out. I'm looking at this line. This is like a little bit of a straight line, but really it's organic, so I'm just going to copy in a more organic way. This way. This is our center part. Sideburn. This is the ear cut out. Yeah, one thing I need to mark is where does the ear cutout end? So that would be good to know. So on this pattern, it's right here. So I'd want to like mark that with like a line and a line to know that I'm ending there. On this one, I'm ending here. That way I know as I'm sewing along, I do not sew those two pieces together. So with that piece of information, I can add that to this pattern. And that's going to go here. And that's the end. And I can write open. All right. Really messy now, but that's fine. We're going to transfer it and transfer all of our notes. This is transferring one pattern here. And use a pen. I'm just going to trace up the patterns. Try to be as neat as possible. It's not going to be perfect, but once we cut it out, should be able to make it really neat. Okay, so registration marks for the center. This is here for B. That's the end line. All right, so now I'm going to say, I'm going to put that mark in there, this mark in here. I'm going to write open. I'm going to write, this is A. And this is B. And our fur direction goes this way. And I want to write Princeton hair. And there are ultimately going to be 4 pieces. So I'll say 1 of 4. Okay? All right. Now we do the next one. So I'm put this tag board aside. Eventually I'll be cutting all these out. Okay. I'm going to put a registration mark here too because that's another side of that material. All right, so now I'll cut out the next piece. Okay, this is the other side of his hair. Okay. So now, I'm going to trace that up. So again, tracing paper, my handy dandy pattern weights, my trusty pen, and I trace. This is the back of the pattern piece. This is the front. Here's where the two of them meet. 2 registrations. This was A. No, was it A? Oh, it's A now. I had marked as C. Oh, whatever. Okay, I'll make this one C then. Make that C. And then this we're going to say open. And then fur direction this way. Okay. I'll put this aside for reference. Like, I start, you can put them together just to keep everything in place. I mean, this is a relatively simple pattern, but if you have really complex patterns, you could have 5, 6, 7, 10, unlimited number of these pattern pieces. And in order to not get confused, you want to just kind of work carefully so that you don't lose anything or get confused. Okay. All right, you guessed it. Now we're going to trace this onto here. So you can see how this all goes together so far. So this one that I told is A is going to be C now. I'm going to change that so I don't get confused later. All right, so now pattern weights. Trace to the tag board. Now we're going to be making eventually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these. So even though it takes some time at the beginning, it goes exponentially faster as you make more and more puppets. And when you save the patterns, things can really go fast. Because if in the future we decide, hey, let's make some more puppets, or let's make a puppet similar using the same head shape, and we've already got a lot of the work done for us. So again, I'm going to transfer these marks. I know this is A, to the center. So this, we leave open. We know that this is going to be C, and our fur direction is this way. We know this is Princeton, hair, 2 of 4. All right. Next piece. So I got these 2 pieces for the back. I'll do this one first. So I can just pull these pins out because all the cuts have been made. All right, so here's the first side of his hair. Let's see if I can be thrifty with our tracing paper. Yes, I can. So, just like before, we're going to trace the shape onto our tracing paper. Now you can also, like, if you don't use tracing paper, you can take these pattern pieces, put them on a copy machine. That's one way to do it. But since we're here, we got tracing paper. This will work just fine. All right, now this is the center. So I'm going to write center back. No, that was a registration mark. That's a registration mark. That's a registration mark. This is open. This was a B. For direction is down. Okay. I'll just kind of clean this up a little bit. Clean this up a little. Now I could just take this one and copy it over here, but they're not quite symmetrical because our hair is purposely not symmetrical. So that won't really work. Okay. And I'm cutting it out. And when I start cutting all of these out from tag board, I will be opening up the floor to questions. So not quite yet, but I'm just giving you a heads up that when I start doing the tag board cutting, we're gonna do some questions. So if you have any questions about anything I've done so far, puppet building in general, what's it like to work with Jim Carrey, whatever comes to your mind, go ahead and ask. But not yet. Now I'm going to trace this. So as we know, this part goes here eventually. It will go here, like so. So now, oh no, B. Yeah, that's right. It goes there. All right. So now, trace this. Tracing the pattern just like before onto the tag board. Get my registration marks in. For direction. This is the part we're keeping open. These are our registration marks. This is B, and this is center back. We have fur direction, and if you're playing along at home, you know I'm going to write Princeton, hair, 3 of 4. All right, final hair pattern piece. Okay, let's see if I got tracing paper to fit this. Thrifty, yes, perfect. aside. I'll put this next to it. I know how it goes together. Okay. Choose this. All right. Registration. Line. This is open. That way. And this is a. All right. Patrick's been watching this whole process, so I'm going to hand this over to him for a little bit to complete, and then once this is transferred to here, I'm going to come back and answer some questions.
All right, so first things first, I get a pair of right-handed scissors because I am not left-handed. So let me grab those right now. It's like the Princess Bride. I am not left-handed either. So I'm going to cut out this tracing paper here. And we're going to trace it onto the tag board. And then also make sure all of our markings and labels are good and accurate. There we go. Cutting this out like so. And as Sean mentioned, we will be taking questions soon as we get to the point where we are cutting these things out. And I'm going to find a place where it fits on the tag board, trace it up, put our pattern weights down, just so this piece of tracing paper doesn't go flying away. And trace along the edge here like so. And trace along the edge like so. And also, we're going to capture those registration marks as well. Make sure we don't miss those. And this line here, we're going to transpose any notes that we've made for ourselves, such as keep things open, for direction, you name it. So, referencing this, for direction goes this way, like so. And then this is A here, like that. This here is going to be left open, make a note of that. And then these registration marks go here, 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 and there. And so that is what that is going to look like once, and then we're going to cut all this out. And then we're going to clean all these lines up as well. So make sure all these registration marks transfer over to the other patterns. So this is what your fur pattern looks like. And then before we do the next step of cutting these out and taking questions, I'm going to give you a little tour of some of the Avenue Q puppets in their current stage. If you've been following us on our social media accounts, you might know that we are building a new set of Avenue Q puppets. And so this might be a fun opportunity to see some of them in their current state. Right now we have a pile of puppets here. So this is Miss Thistle and Newcomer. We have some Rods and some Kates there. And this, of course, is Princeton that we're making the hair for. And then we also have Nicky. We already had his hair patterned up. And then we also have a bunch of bodies. Looks like we're creating some unusual characters right there, but those are actually bodies of puppets. So we have, this is not his body, of course. This is Trekkie Monster stacked on top of some Nicky bodies. They have the live hands, as you can see here. So it's a glove puppet. And here we have a head ready for features. This is how we designed the features. We made them out of paper first, and then we're going to make the eyes out of plastic, perhaps styrene, or maybe cast them, and the nose as well. And the eyebrows you can see are up there. Also, we also have some Princeton bodies here, stacked, ready to go. We have some Kates in the back, as you can see right there. And then if you come to this side over here, we have a collection of Avenue Q heads. So these are our characters that are going to be created. These are the Nickies, ready for the next step of the process. These are the Lucy heads here. And we have the bears, a little bit of fleece and fur combined to create those characters. Bear number 1, bad idea bears. Bear number 2 is there. And most of these characters here were created using our laser cutter. That's how we were able to create these foam patterns, because we knew we were going to be making a lot of characters with a lot of symmetry, and we needed each one to look the same so that when you watch the show as an audience member, you can't tell that it's a different puppet. Because someone might ask, if you're not familiar with the show or have never done a production of Avenue Q, you might be asking, well, Princeton's only one character. Why do you have 5 of them? Or Nikki, why do you have 3 of those? And the reason we do that is during the course of the show, all of these characters have different costumes that they appear in throughout the show. And so the idea is, instead of simply changing a costume, which for a puppet is very laborious process because they can't help you out. They just sort of sit there, and it's hard to do, and you don't want to be taking heads off. So instead, this was an invention of the original show. Instead, what we do is we just make a different costume for a different puppet for each costume that they wear. So Rod is going to have his regular business suit. He's going to have his pajamas. He's going to have his wedding version. So therefore, we have 3 Rods. Now, Trekkie Monster doesn't change costume, but you might be asking yourself, why do you have 2 Trekkie Monsters? The reason we have 2 Trekkie Monsters is there's a gag that some people choose to do in the show where he appears on one side of the stage and then quickly appears on the other side of the stage. Unlike actors, you can't duplicate an actor, but you can duplicate a puppet. So it's just a fun little puppet trick that they do. And Miss Thistle, since she only has one look throughout the show, there's only one version of her, and same with Newcomer, there's only one version of him as well. So this is a little tour of some of the puppets in their current state, and we'll be creating more elements and behind the scenes as we bring them to life. But right now, Sean is going to cut out the patterns, which means, whoa, it is now time for questions. So if anyone has any questions, I saw a few pop up, which I can answer right away. But if you have questions about the puppet building process or things you'd like to see, feel free to ask them now. And let's see, right now, I'll let you know what questions we have.
All right, I'm going to start cutting, and Patrick will ask some questions.
First question is, how would you create longer hair for more traditionally female style?
Great question. And actually, we are going to get to that. Not today necessarily, but in a future post, we might cover it. How are we going to do Lucy's hair? Now, traditionally, her hair's done with wigs. We're opting not to use wigs because our experience with these as rentals is wigs require a lot of maintenance and upkeep, and that's not always available for high schools and local theaters and such. So we might pick a style that is, that befits a longer hairstyle. If you see some of the puppets that we have on our puppet gallery, you'll see times that we've created longer hair. So it might be as simple as keeping that part in the back coming all the way down longer, and then backing it with the same fur. So as you look through, you can see that. Choosing a really long fiber fur. You can create like strips of fur. Lots of different ways to do it, actually.
Yeah, stay tuned because we will be doing a video on how to make hair like Lucy. Because the trick with that is also, how do you make hair out of craft fur that also has full body look to it? And we've developed a technique that we think works really well for creating craft fur hair that also has a lot of layers and body to it. So stay tuned for that.
What other questions do we have?
Next question is, why did you decide to make Trekkie Monster a foam-bodied puppet rather than a sack puppet?
So we gave him a foam body because all of these puppets were built off of the same body form. And that was just for ease of reproduction. And it was helpful to give him something to, for the arms to kind of, terminate from and all that. So we didn't want all of that just to be on the neck. Considering how long his body is, the foam body is actually quite short. But that's why we did it, to add more uniformity to these characters.
And to take some of the stress off of that one single neck seam.
Yeah.
All right. If anyone else has any more questions, feel free to ask them now. If you have a question about puppet building, any of the techniques that we've demonstrated, or techniques you'd like to see, feel free to ask them right now, and we'll get to as many as we can.
Our next chance to answer questions is when we start stitching. Well, we got a few steps to get through before we do that. Right now I'm just cutting out the patterns. All right. So we're using tag board for these patterns. I've said this before, but you can use anything. You don't even have to use tag board. You can just stick with the tracing paper. But since we're making multiples, it's definitely helpful to have it on a sturdier material.
While we've got some people watching, if you like the production of Avenue Q, if that's a show that you enjoy, why don't you put in the comments what your favorite character is? I want to see whose favorite character is who. So if you have a favorite Avenue Q character, go ahead and type it in the comments. And here's a question we have. Why do you start with tracing paper when making a puppet pattern instead of jumping immediately to the tag board?
Great question. The reason why I started with tracing paper as I was making these patterns, I was actually putting the fleece pattern underneath and putting the tracing paper on top and then tracing it. That way I could transfer over all of my notes. And then I can use the tracing paper as a reference. Sometimes I've used a pencil and then just done like a transfer by making a line with pencil and then flipping it over and transferring it with pen. That's another way to transfer it.
And also with tag board, we know we're replicating these puppets a lot, so we wanted something sturdier, but you could have just used the regular tracing paper as your final pattern.
I could have just used this fleece as my final pattern, but eventually you want something we can archive.
Someone wants to know if we're making the boxes for Avenue Q.
We're not making the box puppets. What we figured out is shipping those puppets is really expensive because they're big. They take up a lot of space, and a lot of theaters now just make their own boxes just because it's not really worth the expense of shipping those boxes.
Yeah, these cast of characters, you can actually fit more of the traditional Avenue Q puppets in a box shipping storage than you can those cardboard boxes. They take up a lot of space, and at least the way we have used them in the past, we haven't found a good way to shrink them down and for storage.
Plus, the final finishing is cardboard, and I mean, I guess you can cover them with something else, but that's not very durable, and yeah, there's a lot of reasons why we're not going to get into those boxes.
There was a question about shipping puppets. How do you ship the Little Shop of Horrors puppets?
Our Little Shop of Horrors puppets ship in a giant custom cardboard box and a shipping crate. And the box is actually mounted to the shipping crate. And we actually have a video that shows how we disassemble it, take it apart, and basically all they need to do to pick it up is come with a forklift, pick it up, and send it on its way. Okay, so now I have these. So no more questions for now. We'll get questions later. I have my patterns traced with my fur direction noted, and that will come in handy. I'm also just laying out my original pattern pieces just so I'm reminded of how everything goes together, because it could be a little confusing even with just 4 pieces. Wait, and I forgot to write on this. Princeton hair 4 of 4. It's helpful to put 4 of 4, 3 of 3, 3 of 4, blah blah blah, because if you find 2 pieces, you're like, oh, are there more of these? At least know what you're looking for. All right. So we're going to be using this black fur for his hair. Unlike the Nicky fur, it's totally straight, which I think really says a lot about his character. He's more of a little more uptight, not as freewheeling as Nicky is, for example. All right, so always pay attention to fur direction. So as you can see, as I open this up, the fur direction is going down right now. And if you get confused and you can't really tell, it's helpful to look at the back. Might not be able to see this on video, but there are stripes of it going down. And that means that the weave is going this way. Okay, so that's important because these need to be traced a certain way in order to get the look we're going for. All right, so first up, these guys. Now I have the silver pencil, which I mentioned at the very beginning. I have some extra fur I'm trying to deal with here, but I'm going to try and be as conservative about how much I cut, because fur scraps are always useful, and furs come and go. So when you find a fur that's like perfect for something, hang on to it, or maybe buy a few extra yards or a yard extra, because they change furs all the time. Okay, so fur direction, I know, is going this way. And let's see if I cut that out. Yeah, okay, great. So we're going this direction. So what I want to do is kind of find those lines and make sure my arrow is lined up with the fur direction. And I'll use a silver marker. And the first thing I'm going to mark are these little registration marks. You could use chalk to do this, or dressmaker's chalk, or
And do you want to flip the pattern upside down to trace it, or do you want to flip it right side up so that the part is on the right side?
I was just thinking about that. Right. I want to flip it the other way.
That was a question from the internet.
Oh, internet question?
No, it was my question.
Oh. Let's say you guys are really paying attention. Yeah, that will, even me, it catches me up. Like, what's the right side? What's the wrong side? How do I want this to end up in the final? So it was good that Patrick was double checking that for me. So all these will be tracing upside down. Thank you. Otherwise, his whole hair would have been reversed. In fact, I might even want to note that on the pattern. You know, say like trace upside down, so that in the future me won't make that mistake again. Right? Okay, that's the first pattern piece. And this time, now we've already established they get traced upside down, so I'm not waste that little space where I started drawing. I'll trace the second part of the part. Here's trying to escape. Okay. And I'm making sure I get all those registration marks in there. Alright. That's 2. And then this one, going down this way, so I'm going to flip it this way. And the arrow's going down. Once you understand fur direction, you can do some really fun things with how you use fur direction. Just something that really adds production value to your puppets. A lot of folks, when we started out anyway, I'll speak for myself, didn't think about fur direction. And so much extra detail and a level of storytelling can be added with just, keeping that in mind. And this is going down, and this is going down. And as I'm doing this, I'm already thinking what I'm going to stitch together first. And I think to get myself a win right off the bat, I'm going to stitch these 2 small pieces together right here. The center part. And then we'll go for the back, and then we'll stitch the 2 pieces together. Keep it in mind that part of that's going to be left open. Something easy to forget. You get into the zen of stitching, and before you know it, you've stitched everything closed. So we've talked about this before, but I'll mention it. The way we cut fur is not with scissors. We use a blade, and the reason why we use a blade is because scissors will cut through every single one of those fibers, and first of all, make a giant mess, and it will give your fur a blunt cut look that is not nice. All right. Okay. So now we get to cut out our fur pieces. We're getting close to stitching these together. And once it's stitched together, we can pull it on. We'll see what our hair piece looks like. All right, so I'm using the blade, and I'm just cutting along this line. And as you can see, by the time I'm ready to make the next, puppet hair, I'll be able to go right to this step. So the next 4 will take much less time. Much less. All right, that one. Okay, extra pieces. When you cut fur with a blade, of course, be careful. But it's interesting how quickly the blade dulls. You wouldn't think so. Steel blade for foam, but for some reason those materials, they dull a blade like crazy. Maybe because you need it super sharp to be able to do this kind of cutting. So even if it's a little dull, you notice it. So I accidentally cut one of my registration marks. I'm just gonna get a little bigger so I can see it when it comes time to stitch. Now the nice thing about having a puppet form is I can actually kind of put these pieces right onto the head upside down and stitch them that way. That way they're already keeping that natural curve, and I don't have to like use my knee or a ham or something like that. Okay, a few more cuts here. There's my pattern pieces, don't want to go those away. Don't get too exuberant with the cleaning.
Someone wants to know what you're using to trace onto the black fabric.
So I just used this Prismacolor silver colored pencil, but there's different things they actually make, like marking chalk and things like that, just for this purpose. But for us, we just grab a colored pencil and do it that way. Okay, so I'm going to refer to my patterns that I have laid out here, which I'm using as my reference to make sure everything goes together. I'm leaving the right spaces open and everything. So for starters, this is this. So the first thing I'm going to do is stitch this. This is this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch the center part. So I'll talk a little bit about how I'm doing the stitch, just in case folks don't know. This will be a whip stitch, which means simple in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. This is sort of similar to how you would sew puppet fleece. Same technique, which is you want to just go through the backing, not the fibers. That's really obvious in fur, less obvious when you're stitching fleece, but that is how you get a really invisible seam. Now this is fur, so I could honestly use, I can machine stitch these together, and it would be still totally invisible, just because fur is very forgiving. All right, so I always do a double thread, not at the end, and just do about an arm's length when I start with as far as thread. I'm going to go in and out and then tie off the knot, and then I'm just going to go in and out. I'm left-handed, so I'm going to be working the stitch towards me. And as I'm stitching, if anyone has questions, you can go ahead and ask. Otherwise, we'll just get into the zen of stitching here. By the way, I'm lining up those registration marks, and if I wanted to, I could put a pin to hold these things in place. It's really not necessary because it's pretty small, but just to show it, this is how I would pin it, like that. And I'm stitching these two edges flat against each other. Alright. So after I stitch this, I'm going to go ahead and stitch the back seam, and then we'll stitch the two pieces together. I think I'll do that on the head. And we'll flip it inside out, and Princeton should have a lovely head of hair.
Will you do any trimming on this fur?
Good question. Yes, we'll do some trimming. In fact, we can go ahead and show that after we get it pinned into place. It doesn't have to be stitched into place for the trimming. And we have a few tricks that we use to trim fur. We use clippers, we use scissors. I would think for this, we're probably not going to bring up the clipper, but we'd probably use some scissors, and we have a few scissors that are good at like kind of texturing, which I'll show you. It makes more sense when you see it. So here's the first two pieces. So here's our puppet, and these two pieces are going to go on like so. Yeah, like this. Okay, it's already looking like a little hairstyle. Okay, set him down. So now I'm going to do the back one. I think I'm actually going to go ahead and stitch that on here. So, at the bottom, nice thing about this is I can stitch it right in place and sew it right to this. And you can do this with fleece too, by the way, if you are stitching fleece together for a head form or something. You can also pin it right to your foam head, stitch it in place, and then go ahead and remove it. Now I'm lining up my registration marks. And so there's registration mark here, and then the bottom I'm going to line up, and then I'll line up the top. So you can see eventually, when all this goes together, this will go on, just line up these marks like this, like so. But for starters, I'm going to just sew this middle piece, and I'll use this one as reference to figure out how these all go together. All right. Go ahead and tie off my knot. I'll start at the top here and work my way down. Again, this is a simple whip stitch. I'm stitching just through the backing. Oops. Didn't grab it that time. There we go. That started. And I'm working my way down. I'm probably putting these stitches at 1/8 of an inch apart. Not super tight, but not super far. Because it's fur and it's hair, there's a little more leeway in how spaced out these stitches can be. And if anyone has questions you'd like to ask, now is a good time. Go ahead and pop those questions in. And even if you have a topic that you'd like us to cover in a future live video or another YouTube video, let us know. We like suggestions like that. Coming up, we plan on showing how we make our noses. We have an idea about how we're going to make these puppet eyes, which is different than we normally do it. So we're sort of excited to try that, and we thought we'd do a video showing that process. So now, if anyone has questions, feel free to ask. Alright, I used the thread from last time. It was a little short. I'm going to tie it off now. I could try and get it to the end, but I'm going to fall short on the thread. I just know it, so better be safe than sorry. I usually do about 1 arm length away.
I have a question here.
Okay.
How do you hide the whip stitches on the toupee, and why do you prefer the whip stitch compared to the slip stitch? I imagine strength?
First of all, I don't even know what a slip stitch is, so that's why I like the whip stitch. Basically, the whip stitch is simple, it's strong, you can tie it off pretty much anywhere, so that is the stitch that I prefer. Yeah, especially when we're putting these two materials butted up against each other. I would say there's really only a few stitches that we ever use generally in puppet building. Whip stitch is very common. The next one would be like a back stitch, and that's how we attach our neck sleeves. There's more give. and then we would use like a ladder stitch if we're doing something that's on the surface, or a baseball stitch is called sometimes.
All right, next question.
Mm-hmm.
And that person was clarifying, they meant why not the ladder stitch for this?
Okay, ladder stitch definitely would not want to use because, first of all, I'm stitching from the back, and if I were to stitch it from the back, it would actually turn the seam to the front. That's the advantage of the ladder stitch, is it turns the seam under. So, most likely I will be attaching the hair with a ladder stitch, because then I can draw that seam under and we won't see the stitches around. So that's a good topical stitch.
Have you had experience with fur that it's difficult to sew, i.e. the backing is too loose? Would attaching it to something else before sewing help?
So I haven't really experienced fur that's too loose. I've had the opposite problem, where it's too thick. That has been a challenge, where there's like no stretch, no bend. It's very thick, almost like a carpet. That I've had. The other thing I've had is a lot of these new furs, like these minkies and all that, which have like a really, for some reason when you touch them, they just feel icky. And when you cut them, they like, almost like the fabric like dissolves. It's really hard to work with. It's hard to get a clean edge. If you do cut the fibers, they go everywhere, especially right up your nose. So that is a fur I've had a challenge working with. All right, so now I've got this. Now I've got the, I'm going to stitch the back part to the front part. So I'm following this model here. And, all right, so let me go to where we're going to be open here. So we're open here and here, but I have it all flipped. So that means this is this, this is this, this is this. Okay, there we are. Okay.
If you have any more questions you want to ask while we're in the sewing part, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll address as many of them as we can get to.
Right.
And also, if you want to learn more about the puppet building process, be sure to check out our last 2 live videos that we've done. In those videos, we showed basic foam construction, including how to make puppet heads, bodies, and hands. And the last one we showed how to dress a puppet, including making eyes and noses. Here's a question we have. Thank you so much for doing these live streams. They are amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. When doing the whip stitch, instead of butting up the 2 pieces being sewn, can they be sewn back to back and then flattened later?
No. I know what you're asking, but the answer is no. And the reason why is when I have a whip stitch like this, the material is laying perfectly flat and the seam is really flat. So that's one of the benefits. I'm turning this the right way right now because my brain is trying to twist around and figure out this with this and everything flipped around. So I'm actually just putting it on normal so I can figure out this is the big part and how does this all line up properly. Okay, so this goes here. There we go. Now it all makes sense. Okay, great. And this part, I'm trying to figure out where that termination line is.
All right, while you're figuring that out, another question. Do you guys seam pick? Any tips?
We seam pick sometimes. I mean, if the seam isn't visible, then why bother? Like on hands and such. I mean, unless someone's coming and looking at your puppet with a microscope, it's not really necessary, especially when they're moving around. But we will certainly down the face. That would be a place where it would be, smart to, to make sure that your seams are as invisible as possible. All right. I'm actually referring to my fabric patterns here. Just need that silver marker. One of my marks didn't quite come through dark enough. And that's the part that I want to leave open. So that part I actually want to pin right to this. So these two get pinned together here. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put like a simple basting stitch right there, just a simple stitch, so that those two will be held together. Because how the open part I want to keep open, and I don't want to have to like stitch it up, undo it. So instead of a pin, it's going to put a stitch right on this little registration mark, which is why the registration marks are there. And then I'll figure out the second sideburn, and then we can pin it onto the head and put it all together. I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so that's just I'm just tacking it in place. All right. That's one side. And then over here, see, it's tricky because the center does not line up at the center, because it's purposefully off center. And this one lines up, looks like here. Yes.
Once you get that stitch, we have a few more questions we're going to get to.
Sure, go ahead and ask away.
Great. So, do you guys ever sculpt a foam understructure for hair to give it body or a specific shape?
Sure, we could do that. You can add like little foam bumpets underneath, and in fact, that's probably what we're going to be doing when it comes to Kate, at least for her wedding hairdo. It's very likely that we'll be doing that. So yeah, that's certainly something that we have done and could do. All right, so these guys, I'm putting another stitch just to tack it in place.
Next question. Have you done a full make in the past with Eric the Elephant? Do you plan on doing a full custom design character build as a live stream in the future?
So we built one puppet from start to finish, but it was with patterns. If we were to do a live stream from Eric the Elephant, we would probably it would take weeks. So the Eric the Elephant videos, that was actually shot over quite a few weeks and then edited down. So we wouldn't do something like that, but we could do pieces and parts in live. We did do a live video from start to finish, but the only way we were able to do that is we already had the patterns. So getting the patterns is a big part of this process. Going from the design to a three-dimensional puppet, that's kind of the whole ball game.
Someone asks, I'm also curious, how did the dangling antenna on the back of the tree bees' heads? So how did you make the dangling antennas on the back of the tree bees' heads?
Okay, so the tree bees are puppets that we made for some really great videos. We did not make the videos, but they're really fantastic. If you haven't seen them, they're pretty darn popular on YouTube, which is really cool. A Canadian singer-songwriter performs. And I think you're talking about the little antenna danglies. So they kind of look like axolotls. And those were actually made by, we had them, those puppets are actually very different. They were sculpted in 3D in a digital environment, and then printed a positive and then a mold, so that that's how those were made. So they were just foam, a little bit of wire inside, and then covered in fleece. Well, those puppets are more high tech than they appear, because they first existed as digital models. Because the puppet designers, we didn't design them, but they had digital models already. We're like, well, we already have digital models. Instead of us interpreting, why don't we just export to a mold, basically?
Now that Joann's is unfortunately gone,
Yes.
Where would be a great place to find the kind of quality fleece found at Joann's? I'm in Vegas, the Southwest, and have not researched since I stocked up on fleece.
Well, you might actually have some, living in Vegas, you might have some possibilities, because you are in an entertainment capital. So we have found that for places like LA or New York, it's actually possible to find some of these materials. It's harder to find if you're not in Vegas, or California or New York or some of these places. I've heard a rumor that Michaels is going to pick up some of the fabric lines and start selling more fabric at their stores, which would be great. But yeah, it's going to be a little bit of time to figure out, where we're going to get these materials until that. Yeah. So, question is, I guess I don't really know the answer at this point.
Here's a question. How would you attach posable ears with wire in them to a foam head without the wire poking through the foam and potentially hurting someone?
Well, I would take the wire in the ears and poke them through the foam, and then I would put a little gasket on the other end, like leather or wood, and then I would just bend those wires out and then laminate it down with a piece of ultra suede on top. So then the wire is sandwiched in the ultra suede, and those ears are so posable, and that wire is not going anywhere.
It will also secure your ears in place better, like if you're making an elephant or a mouse or something.
Exactly. Now these ears we're just going to stitch on. And we'll use just regular thread to stitch them on because, they don't get that much wear and tear as far as the ears, and they're pretty small. Although you'd be surprised. We're always surprised, these Avenue Q puppets, they do get some wear and tear out there in these shows. That is for sure.
If you have more questions, this is a great time to ask them.
Yep, I'm almost finished stitching, and then we're going to reveal what this looks like. If I've done everything correctly, it should look like a pretty decent hairstyle. We'll do a little trimming to clean it up. Alright. Coming to the end of stitching here. Just keep following this form. Alright. Last few stitches. Hip stitch, fur. A lot of these furs we get in the fashion district in downtown LA. So if you're in an area that has like some sort of a garment district or a fashion district, that's a great place. And also we've had pretty good luck buying fur online. The hard part is you don't actually see the material until it arrives, and sometimes it could be like a little disappointing. Like, oh, it didn't look like this online, or oh, we bought these two because they look different, and it turns out they're the exact same material, just different lighting situations.
2 more questions here.
Mm-hmm.
How do you look after and renovate a rental puppet when it comes back to you?
The most important thing is to get it out of the plastic and get it out of the box, and you want that to air out as soon as possible. That's job number 1. And then it's all about just keeping an eye on little things, checking, doing a once over, checking the seams, checking the security of the arm rods, things like that. And you'll notice over time there are certain things that get a lot of wear and certain things that don't. Right now I'm just kind of not centering it up because it's not going to be centered. I'm just sort of...
Here's a question as it relates to basic puppet construction. With smaller puppets, do you recommend having the neck and body one piece, or do you prefer keeping them separate?
I mean, it definitely depends on the design, right? If you're making a snake, then I would say they should be not separate. So I would say it depends on the design, but I usually find it more advantageous to keep the head and the body separate.
It really depends on how small that character is.
Yeah, depends how small it is, what you're making, the particulars,
and how flexible that neck is.
Yeah, you don't want the. And the reason why our necks are separate is it's kind of like an industry standard. That's one thing, but also it makes sure that you can turn left and right. Also makes sure that you can get the body off if necessary. All right, so here's where we're at. I'm gonna just kind of pin one ear in place just so we can kind of have an idea.
Here's a question. Any entertaining rental horror stories?
Mercifully, no. I would say, in general, what is usually the most surprising is if the puppets have been sealed up for a period of time, they can smell like like hockey gear after a season. So if you think about it, it's just fur, foam, and fabric. And if you have performers out there, you know, working their butts off night after night, sweating into these puppets, it can stink. So it's really important the best way to take care of them is to air them out as quickly as you can. And that's true for it's not just rental puppets, that's true for anything. You know, it could be, you know, the Muppets, like the most professional puppet show in town, and you want to get that puppet off the performer's hand onto a stand and dry it out. I mean, some people even sweat to the point that it's beneficial to have like a hair dryer set on cool to keep the puppet from smelling. All right, so this is what it looks like now. That's our hairstyle. Right now it's looking a little shaggy, which is fine because we're about to remedy that. So the first thing I'm going to do is get that puppet stand right there. We're going to trim up his hair. Okay. So got a few things I'm going to use. Not going to use a clipper. Because I don't think we really need to do that. But right now I'm just kind of styling it. You can see how we have our parts in there and everything. But this is sort of like, this would be like the 70s hippie version of him, which is not really the story that we want to tell. So let me get a pair of scissors really fast. So we're going to do a standard haircut, and then I'm going to come through and do a more of a detailed pass. But the first thing I know I want to do is I want to take off this shag, especially here in the back. Okay, so I'm just going to get a pair of scissors, and who knows, with all this puppet hair I've been cutting, I could probably get my barber's license. I don't know. So I'm just going to cut off the shaggy excess, get this clean. I mean, honestly, we could bring in a clipper for his hair in the back. I don't know if we need it, though. Alright. Just cleaning it up. Just pretty much bringing it, not quite to the edge of the fur. Alright. See what happens when you cut fur with scissors. You will get fur everywhere. Okay, so now I know I want to clean up those sideburns. Yeah, I'm gonna tighten it up in the back more. But I now want to tighten up these sideburns. In fact, I decided I am gonna get a clipper and do a little clipper work. So I want to bring them down, not just flat, but I want to bring them down in thickness as well. So then I'm going to cut his sideburns here. Okay. So some of this hair I'm going to want to just pull over like this, and some of this hair I want to come down. So this hair will eventually be like the length of his hair, but I don't want that just to be the sideburn. So I want to take some of that down. Same on this side, I want to kind of bring some of this back. And then we want the sideburns just to be trimmed up. So let me get my clipper.
And there was a question, someone asked, how long would you cut and sew a prefab wig to fit a puppet head?
So if it's a wig that we've purchased, you can cut and sew purchased wigs as well, and we've done that before. I think that's what they're asking. And there's lots of ways to, if you want to make it smaller, if you want, like we had one that we needed like bangs on this particular wig, we didn't have bangs, found another wig, and I took the back part off where it comes down, and I stitched it on as bangs. So we've done that sort of thing where he's modified before. All right, if you have hair like me, you might be very familiar with one of these. So I'm going to start with a relatively longish one, but not
Well,
too
Tell
long.
the folks what kind of clipper you're actually using.
So this is a pet hair trimmer, and we recommend getting pet hair trimmers. This is made by Wall. We had one that was so great. We've actually never been able to find one as good. Unfortunately, it broke because it was really old. But the nice thing about pet hair trimmers, first of all, they're quieter, but they seem to be able to manage the finer fibers of craft fur, because craft fur is not like our hair. It's like more akin to animal fur. All right, so I'm gonna plug this in. Shouldn't be too loud. I'm gonna start the sideburns. I have a guard on here, which I just know I'm eventually gonna take off. I'm just gonna take it off. Let's be brave, because I'm just gonna work my way down, kind of at an angle, carefully. Remember, this hair won't grow back, so you want to, work with confidence, but I wouldn't say caution. I would say just work carefully. So right now I'm just cutting down these sideburns. It's interesting how many different skills you employ with puppetry, puppet making. We've actually, for some of our wigs, we had them professionally styled by a really great wig maker in New York that we have a relationship with. So when we have something that's like we made a super cool drag queen wig and things like that, it's a little beyond what you can purchase and beyond our area of expertise. We've called on him. He's an artist when it comes to wigs. All right. I'm just trimming these sideburns. Notice I'm being pretty careful about it. I'd be ashamed to mess up now. So close to the finish. Because once you take it down a certain distance, you get to the backing, and there's no going back from there. I'm just stuck with it. Okay, I think that's a good length of the sideburn. And I see a little long hairs I can just come in and remove. I'll clean it up. Clean up along the ear. Okay, now, this is not new if you know anything about hair, but these thinning shears are really great for cutting fur, because it will remove any sort of a blunt line. In the real world, these are used to give people's hair a little texture, a little body, and they can be used here too. The same purpose. These are super useful when you don't want to, have a blunt cut seam. All right, so that, and I'm going to now do the other sideburn. Starting to look a little more respectable. Now the thing to remember is this hair needs to pretty much be styled out of the box, because I would necessarily rely on a renter to know, to have the expertise in hairstyling. So one of our goals is to make these hair like wash and wear. Pull it out of the box, shake it off, ready to go on stage. So that's one of the challenges. Now with someone like Nikki, it's easier because his hair is just shaggy and you can't really mess it up. But it will be challenging when it comes to hair like Lucy's, Kate's, Rod. sideburn is good. Now I'm gonna trim along the ear. And then I'm gonna take my thinning shears. Kind of shape this a little bit.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
How short can you trim that before it is ruined? Also, how would you imitate really short hair, like a fade?
Huh. We've done fades before, and they're pretty challenging, but we've done them. And the way that we figured out, because of the particular character we were making, the way we did it is we used fleece, start with fleece, that was the same color as the puppets, and then we did an airbrush of that fleece all the way to a straight black color, like jet black, and then once it hit that, we blended it with fleece that we had pre-dyed to be that black color. It worked pretty good. I was pretty pleased with the way it turned out.
Here's a question. Do you use something to seal the hair into certain shapes? Rods or
There are
quiff?
tricks that you can use.
Oh, rods coif, maybe?
Okay. Well, the trick to getting Rod's hair is really how you sew it, and we'll show you how we do that at some point, perhaps. Which is that you sew the two fur fibers so that they're going against each other, and they'll always stand each other up. So no matter what happens, it will always keep that position. Now, other tricks, what can you use? We've tried things like, we've tried hair gel, we've tried hairspray, we've tried all of it. It's all pretty temporary in reality, and it can get a real lacquered look. But one thing we found is if you take a little bit of Elmer's glue and then water it down with some water, just like school glue, that makes a really good puppet hair gel. Even still, it doesn't last forever, but that's one thing you can use. Okay, now I'm gonna go for the back here. I'm just gonna be brave.
And then what about how far can you trim it before you ruin it?
Well, you trim it until you see the backing, and that's how far you can go. And every fur is different. Some thinner furs, you might not be able to go so far. Some thicker furs, you might be able to go further. If it's curly, you might be able to get away with it going further. However, sometimes curly furs might have some gaps that aren't apparent until it gets shorter and you realize, oh, bummer. Also, some furs have backings that are different colors. So every fur is going to be different. Best to experiment before you just go for it. I'm taking the trimmer down to take it down here in the back. Shorten this hair up a little bit.
And not every fur cuts the same way with the trimmer. This fur seems to be quite successful.
Yes, this fur is cutting really nicely. Some furs almost seem to reject the trimmer. I don't know what it is. It's like some weird, I don't know why.
Here's a question.
Yes.
Do you guys line your puppets on the inside for the performers? There's a French puppeteer on YouTube, forgot her name, who does it, and it's fascinating.
Okay, the answer is no, we don't. Sometimes if there's an area that's going to get extra wear and it happens to be really soft foam, we might put a little, pad of fleece there. But the reality is, the more you start adding to the inside of your puppets, you're just going to limit the movement. So we always try to see what's the least we can have inside the puppet to make sure that we are maximizing the performability while minimizing the weight. Oop, got a gouge.
You'll never see it on stage.
No, and I'm going to come through with these thinning shears and I'm going to shape it a little bit anyhow.
Now, will the back be flat or rounded like that?
Let's do rounded.
Oh.
Now I'm coming across here. It'll be less round than it looks because I actually have quite a bit of fiber still coming off. So we can go quite a bit shorter.
You want to tell the people how Princeton used to have a styled wig and why we've moved to craft fur on this one?
Yeah, so when we have a bunch of set of Avenue Q puppets that we're making this set to replace, mostly because over years and years and years and years and years, as you can imagine, they start to show their age. And it gets to the point where it's like, are we going to fix it or are we going to rebuild it? We used to have styled wigs, but that styled wig will look great for one show, and then it doesn't look great anymore. It's really hard to keep it looking nice. Wigs are high maintenance. You know, it's like of all the Muppets, Miss Piggy is the most high maintenance, mostly because she has a wig and has to look beautiful. It's not like it's just fur or feathers or something. So she has to travel pretty much her own stylist. So if we were sending a stylist along, that'd be great. And in fact, one of the there was one show that we were renting to, and one of the parent volunteers also happened to be like a hairstylist. And they're like, is it alright if our parent volunteer styles all the wigs? We're like, absolutely. And it'll look great. And then it gets put in the back in the box, and it comes back here, and it looks like not so great anymore. Alright, so you can see I got quite a bit of fur trimmed off. I'm going to come through with these thinning shears. I'm just going to, cut where I might have a line. And just help to disguise that line.
Here's a question about different fur materials.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the fragile ostrich feather hair? Is it worth the time?
Ostrich feather hair is very time consuming. Certainly for these puppets, like for a Trekkie monster, not worth it at all. Because for a television character, you might want the look of it. But I would say it is fragile. It has a lot of great movement to it. But for these puppets and the way they're used, it's not really worth getting into.
Someone said, I vaguely remember in past live, you said the puppets are polar fleece as opposed to Antron or F3.
Yes.
Please correct if I'm wrong. Why the decision was made, and where did you get the fleece from?
Great question. So yes, these are polar fleece instead of other fleeces, and the fact that you have to ask shows you that it really doesn't matter, because you are seeing these puppets closer than any audience member will. The truth is, polar fleece is more durable than Antron fleece. When it comes to Princeton, orange is orange is orange. We're not like necessarily trying to, match perfectly the original orange. I think most audiences won't know. Plus, to be honest, this show has been around long enough that I think it's okay to make a few changes. Just like our Audrey 2 puppets. But yes, for increased durability, for uniform color, and where we got it, Joanne's RIP.
Also, manufactured polar fleeces as opposed to dyed fleeces. Dyed fleeces are great for one-off puppets, custom builds. But for this, we're building multiple characters, and you really want that color fast. You really want that color to stay and not fade. You can't beat these processes that created these colored materials.
Yeah, I mean, think about a polar fleece in the real world. What is in the snow? It's in the sun. It's if you're not using it for a puppet, it's in
Blankets.
Blankets and your ski gear. So we're talking durable, color fast material. So since we're handing these off to high schoolers and people who might be using puppets for the first time in their lives, we think that this is a perfectly decent alternative. Plus, it's not like fleeces out there. There are more fleeces on the market, but fleece is changing all the time. So it's not like, oh, too bad we can't get the good stuff, because we never had the good stuff. We just came around too late. So the only fleece that we ever had, you know, readily available was version 2 or 3 of what people might consider to be the good stuff. It's looking good. A little bit of time to trim, but you know, it's worth it. The fact that you can have a, you know, pretty ready-made puppet fresh out of the box. I'm gonna try these. Another pair of these thinning shears. Looks like they might have a little more oomph to them. And again, I'm just taking away all those lines. Luckily, this is something you'll have to do once. I mean, we'll have to do it 4 more times, but... And who knows, for the, like... I guess he doesn't have the pajamas, but for the wedding one, we might, you know, slather it down a little bit more with a little bit of glue, perhaps, so it looks a little more cleaned up. Although, honestly, for stage, did you notice? I don't know. We're always trying to strike that balance between what gets the character across, what looks good on stage, and striking that balance. That's one of the reasons why we made all their features larger, is we wanted, like, cartoon... We call these the cartoon versions of the characters. A nod to the original, but also sort of asserting our own style, especially when it comes to the head shapes. These head shapes are totally different than the originals. We gave them all underbites just because I think that's sort of funny. It's comical. Also really easy to operate. Because of the thinness of the bottom jaw, there's no need for a thumb cup or anything in there. The foam holds your thumb in place. So any bit of like interior architecture that we are able to remove, we did. Any work that you don't see, but still you have to build, we just tried to streamline and simplify as much as possible to make it as user-friendly as possible. Keeping in mind that for the most part, these are in the hands of, you know, people who haven't puppeteered before.
And the size of the features, you're making them larger so that...
Yeah, they're large because they're a little cartoony, but also we wanted to be able to read to the back of the house. You know? So we kind of went a little more bold with that. So all these decisions
And also
are
the
not arbitrary.
eye pupils we're using are going to be vinyl stickers as opposed to animal eyes. So that gave us some flexibility in the size of the eyes we could make, because we weren't reliant on a manufactured item that only comes in a variety, a small variety of sizes.
Yeah, when you get into animal eyes, you have some limitations. But we use the vinyl stickers for our eyes. So we'll do the vinyl sticker, if you've seen that, how we did this before, the vinyl sticker with the eyes with color in them, which that's one of the things that we like to put in our eyes to set them apart from other puppet makers. You sort of have this, you know, 3-part eye, almost like an anime eye, where you have the color, the pupil, and then a highlight. So we just like that look. And speaking of eyes, we have some stuff on order, which I'm very excited to try out as a way to make the eyes in a different way we've ever made eyes before. We're pretty excited. So we're going to try it out once it arrives. And if it works, and it works within a reasonable amount of time, we'll do a video to show you how to make eyes using silicone and plastic, which is unusual for us. That'll be a new technique. Coming through a little more. And the nice thing is, once I have this done, this will become the model for the others. So I'll just need to stitch them all together, pin them in place, and I'll just keep looking back and forth at this one as like our reference, basically.
And the goal will be to make them as similar as possible, but the good thing is, no one puppet is ever seen on stage with its duplicate at the same time, and so even slight variations will go unnoticed by audience members.
Exactly. In fact, even notices that are supposed to be obvious go unnoticed.
I think most people don't even
Like
register costume
changes.
changes.
But the reason why there's so many characters is because of all the costume changes, and we have a really great costumer who has just finished all of the costumes And last I heard, they're on their way back to us here. And once we have those, we'll very excitedly share those with all of you. All right. A lot of fur. I'm going to give this guy a shake. All right. Looking good. I want to do a little more trimming on the side here. Just kind of take this thing down a little bit. It's like, since I don't have hair, this is my way of like having that experience going to the barber. Yeah, right now I'm just cleaning up around the ear, taking it nice and short. We want him to look rather pulled together, even though he doesn't really know what his life has in store for him. But then again, who among us do? Okay. All right. So here's where we're at. I'm going to do a little more trimming in the back here. And since someone asked earlier about how far down could you trim, I'll go ahead and just try that experiment with this particular fur. Just to show you what it looks like when you trim it all the way down. Because we have used this hair for crew cuts and such. And in fact, that's probably what we'll end up doing for Rod, is make him look really nailed down by almost giving him like a crew cut kind of an appearance. Okay. All of these stray hairs, eventually we'll just either take a lint roller or, you know, like a roll of tape, pretty much what a lint roller is, and we'll be able to take all those stray furs off. Okay. Get my puppet stand. Fur everywhere. We were making some puppets for a client. We made like 100 of them. And they're all purple fur. And we had purple fur in the shop for months. I'm just trimming this up a little bit. Again, our goal is it comes out of the box and it's ready to work. Real wash and wear hair here. Alright, just tighten that up. I'm going to tighten this up a little here.
Someone says, what camera are you guys using for the live stream? Loving the quality.
Oh, wow. This is just an iPhone. I don't know what version it is. A later version. Not super new. But good, I'm glad. It's looking good. Hopefully it's sounding good. Okay. All right. I think we have it. All right, so here's our Princeton hair. All completed. So just so you see, it started, you may remember, like this. And now we went to this. Again, these are the very same techniques that you can use to pattern your puppets, whether it's fleece or fur or whatever. And we are going to show more steps of the process as we complete these puppets. The first show is coming up, and we're getting them ready. All the costumes are done. As soon as those are done, we'll share those on our Instagram. Be sure to follow us at Swazzle Puppet Studio. We would sure love if you would like and subscribe to this channel. If you like what we're doing, if you support our live feeds, if you want to see more of this content, we'll keep making it as long as folks are watching, as long as they're commenting, as long as they're sharing, as long as they're subscribing. This is a great way for us to get some work done and also talk to all of you, teach our skills in real time. So we definitely plan on doing more of these in the future. So from the Swazzle Puppet Studio, I'm Sean Johnson. I'm signing off. Patrick's behind the camera. He's also signing off. And we'll see you all next time in the Swazzle Puppet Studio. Goodbye.